Yeah.
Okay.
Camera rolling.
No. So Mandy, this show really proved quite popular when it came on. I think it surprised a lot of people.
Us included.
Yes. Why do you think the show had such an immediate impact on people?
That's a good question. I mean, we've all devised our own conclusions. I think people out in the world were just sort of hungry for this kind of entertainment, for something that was emotional and cathartic. And I think with the crazy presidential race and election at that point in time, and now where we are in this country and how sort of divided and divisive everything feels, I think our show is just sort of, I guess, fit into this space of there's something really uniquely unifying and uniting about what the show is and the message of the show, and families can take all different forms and look all sorts of different ways, and I guess people are able to sort of look at the show and infuse it's like holding a mirror up to yourself. You're able to sort of examine your own challenges and obstacles and stuff in life, and why you may or may not have made certain choices, and relate to these characters and what they're going through in their lives. And other than that, I mean, I also think the writing is just pretty remarkable and spectacular, and so nuanced, and feels really elevated for network television, whatever that means.
Well, it certainly does. I mean, take us back to the beginning then. What was your immediate reaction to reading the pilot?
I loved it. I had 3 pilots consecutively that didn't go during pilot season, and so I was sort of at this juncture where I was considering maybe this is not for me. Maybe I shouldn't be an actress, or maybe I shouldn't keep trying television. Maybe I should go back to school or concentrate on music. And my team, we were all sort of on the same page. You know what, there's so many different mediums of ways to reach and watch content these days, so let's not throw our hat in the ring for traditional network pilot season. Let's just concentrate on cable and whatnot, all these other platforms. And then a week later, I got this script for the Untitled Dan Fogelman project that was on NBC, and I was like, you guys, what? This is everything we just talked about not doing. And it was a little off cycle. It was October of 2015, and I read it, and I knew Dan from Tangled because he wrote Tangled, and I played the voice of Rapunzel, but we weren't friendly by any means. But I saw his name and recognized his name, and thought, okay, I'm a big fan of what he does, so I'm sure this has to be quality. And I read it and was floored. I didn't see the twist coming at the end, and I went right back to page 1 and started reading it immediately again, and trying to see if I could discern different clues as the script went on. But I got on the phone and was like, whatever I have to do to be a part of this, whoever I have to meet with and audition and read. And a couple weeks later, I went in and auditioned for Dan, and John and Glenn, our directors, and then waited about a month. They were like, we liked that, but now we're gonna go read a bunch of girls in New York and more girls here in LA, and we'll let you know, we'll get back to you. And so a month later, they came back and said, yep, we have a small handful of women and men that we want to sort of chemistry read together, one of which was Milo. And I knew going in, I had heard through the grapevine that Milo was the guy to beat. So when they brought me in to read with just him, I was like, I think this is a good sign. I don't know, but I think it is. And sure enough, we sort of just had instant rapport with one another, and we're very comfortable with one another. And I remember leaving the room going, oh, I don't want to get my hopes up. I've been in this place before where you're so in love and obsessed with a project, and then meeting him and working with Milo, I was like, oh, don't go there, Mandy. There's no guarantee that this is gonna happen and come to fruition. And then lo and behold, it did. But I was very lucky.
It did, and you got a Golden Globe nomination from it.
Sure.
Yeah, along with Chrissy and
yes.
The show. What did that kind of recognition mean for you guys? You had only been on the air for a couple of months, so.
I still sometimes it hits me, and I'm like, whoa, that's bizarre. That's bananas. That's mind-boggling that happened. I think, on a personal level, sure. But for me, it was the bigger picture of the show, and all of us collectively, and all of the work that we get to do together, because this show is so, dependent upon these 8 sort of ensemble actors, and believing these relationships and these characters, and sort of what trials and tribulations that are happening in their lives. And so for the show just itself to get like, I remember the end of last year, we were all sitting at this like AFI ceremony with like the top 10 TV shows and top 10 movies, and you're looking across the room at like Martin Scorsese and Tom Hanks, and you're like, I'm in the same room, like we've aired 10 episodes, like this is insanity. So it's been a wild ride, and obviously no one can ever foresee this sort of success and the warm embrace that the show really has found with its audience out there. You can never expect it, but it's like it is pretty mind-blowing still. Well, I think it will be for a long time for all of us.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So who is Rebecca? I mean, talk a little bit about who she is and what qualities about her jumped out at you when you were first finding the character.
Sure. I mean, this is a woman who I think is deeply maternal, who didn't necessarily know that about herself or didn't see that in the cards for herself. But when that happened in her life, I think she embraced it wholeheartedly. In terms of like what I relate to, like I love that she is a very deeply maternal person, but I also think she's an independent thinker, and she's a fierce lover of her family and her friends and like the people that are in her husband, obviously the people that are in her life. But there is this like sort of sadness to who she is, and like this person who never got to fully realize this dream and this essence of like this very, very primal essence of who they are. And I think she was an artist in like every fiber of her being, and meeting her husband sort of pushed her priorities in a different direction, and then obviously getting pregnant and having not just one child but 3 children all at once had meant that like her career and sort of that artistic side of her really had to take a back seat for years and lie dormant, and then for it to never fully sort of get activated and realized again and actualized in a real way that she had always sort of foreseen. I think this was a woman that was like, when my kids are old enough, like I'm gonna, get back out there and find a way, whether it's local theater or playing at, open mic nights or something. And for that to never really catch on again is so sad to me. Like, she was so overwhelmed in her life and being a mother to 3 kids all at once with very different needs, and a husband, and keeping a house running, and just the unimaginable tasks of, being a mom that I have no idea about at this point in my life. I think there is a resentment and there is a sadness to her that I could sort of tap into. I could understand, certainly.
I was going to ask, where did you find that? Because, I mean, like you said, it's not necessarily something that you have life experience from.
Yeah. I think we all have bits and pieces that we're able to sort of bring to the job. We've all faced rejection, and we've all lost things and people, and so I think I had enough to sort of like sprinkle in there. And to be quite honest, there were parts of, especially the finale, like things that my character said and that were said back to my character that like echoed things that had happened in my life so spookily that it really, really resonated with me.
Oh, hey.
Are you leaving? Oh my, I'm so happy to see you today. Let's catch up soon, okay? I'm back in a couple weeks. All right, bye.
Nice to see you.
Milo Ventimiglia. Bye, Mike.
The show really, it allows you to stretch a lot as an actress.
Yeah.
And you even get to play an older version of yourself. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I mean, how many times as an actor, like, are you going to have a job where I get to play this character from 23 to 66. Mm-hmm. Dan Fogelman, it is not an understatement, like, changed my life. And I tell him that every time I see him, which probably annoys him at this point, but he changed my life. Like, I was waiting for an opportunity like this, even just to play one fraction of who this woman is. But the fact that, like, I do get to play this woman who has lived a life, a fully realized life, and has lost a spouse and a child, and is remarried and has grandchildren and has seen her children get married and divorced and have babies and all of that. Like, this is a woman who knows who she is in her life. I have none of that from my own life experience to sort of bring to the table. The writing is what it is, and is so heads and tails, like, off the charts fabulous that helps all of us exponentially, like, goes without saying. It makes our jobs that much easier. But and now I forget what you asked. Just to, like, playing this character from 23 to 66.
Right.
Yeah, it's just the opportunity of a lifetime. And I think I was initially overwhelmed at the prospect of, like, how am I going to have the answer to all of these questions? Like, this is a woman who has lived a life, and a rich life, I'm sure, and has gone through so much. Like, I just sort of take it episode by episode and answer as much as it's like, as much as I need to know in that particular given moment.
Well, to that end, I mean, were there any moments from this last season that were particularly daunting or challenging, or maybe reticent? I don't know how I'm going to do this.
A lot. But that's like, I relish that. I think that's sort of what you look for as an actor. Like, I would not want to show up to work every day and just go like, I'm gonna sit back and like take it easy. Like, I mean, it wouldn't be very fulfilling.
No, of course.
It'd be fine to get a paycheck, and we've all had those jobs where you just show up and you're like, okay, I can do this with my eyes closed, but this is certainly not that. There are a lot of moments, I think, in like present day Rebecca. Like, I remember apologizing to Sterling's character at the end of episode 17. It's like, whew, this is 36 years of, it's like I get emotional thinking about it, 36 years of a secret and of guilt and torment, and something she kept from the love of her life. I knew, I was like, Jack absolutely passed away, without knowing the truth. And I had to keep it to myself and harbor this secret, and knowing that my child like had this desire to know where they came from and who their father was, and I denied him that. And just the way that the situation sort of unfolded was a lot to sort of carry, and to make sure that moment really landed in a proper way was difficult, made more difficult by the fact that we were shooting outside. So of course I'm in 4 hours of prosthetics, which already are hard to shoot like in daylight. Of course it's much easier when like you can sort of control the light in a studio and on a set and a stage. So we're outside contending with dogs barking, with neighbors getting pissed at us shooting, with fire engines and helicopters and like all this noise. Then I kid you not, I'll never forget, I'm crying and looking at Sterling, and I'm in the midst of the scene, and he just came up and very gently like grabbed both of my hands and was like, "Hey Ma, I think a bird just released on your head, and I want to make sure that the camera doesn't pick it up." Like, so gentle. If it had been me, I would have been like, "You got a bird pooped on your head." Like, I wouldn't have been able to. And he was so like, it kept me in the moment, and I was wearing this little plastic fedora honoring William because he had just died. And somebody came and like very gingerly like wiped the bird poop off, and we continued with the scene. But he was so great about keeping me in the moment, because it was a hard one, and he knew like this is a challenging moment for us.
He called you Mom too.
He called me Mom.
I think that speaks to the amount of realism and presence that you guys have.
We're certainly a family.
Well, since you age in the show, you're able to work with everybody in the cast. So what is the dynamic between you guys as an ensemble? What is that like?
We love each other. We really, truly are a family, like in every sense of the word. There is not a bad apple. We all are supportive of one another. That sounds so cheesy, but I think it's evident. Like when we're in the same room, people have seen like on panels and whatnot, like that you can't fake that stuff. Like we do genuinely just really love each other. And I feel lucky because Milo doesn't get to work with everybody. And I do, although in those moments, like present day Rebecca is normally like me crying or like in some incredibly like emotional moment, so I don't like normally get to yuck it up with everybody, and they're so much fun. It feels like two different shows, and I tell Milo that all the time. I'm like, our stuff and our family and like who we are as Jack and Rebecca with the kids, the younger kids, feels like a totally different show than when I am on set with like Justin and Chris and Chrissy, and like they're all just like jokesters, and they get to like have fun and joke around. I'm like, oh, Milo and I never do that.
Well, to that end, I mean, the finale is particularly heartbreaking to watch.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
That episode we knew was coming from pretty much the beginning. I remember Dan telling Milo and I literally before we started shooting episode 2, he's like, the season finale, like episode 18 is you and Milo, just you and Milo, and it is going to be Jack and Rebecca first meeting and then Jack and Rebecca separating. And I was like, whoa, okay. And I love that even with the success that we've been lucky enough to find, like, he didn't deviate from that. He really sort of stuck to his game plan. And it was challenging because we didn't get the script until kind of right before we started shooting, and Milo and I knew that Dan had told us and had forewarned us, like, you guys are going to have a 6-page fight scene, and I want to do it in a oneer. I want to shoot it in one shot, and we'll choreograph it with Yasu, our DP, and with our camera department, and so it's seamless, but that's really important to me that we do it in one shot. It ended up that once we got there, we did shoot it like 5 or 6 times in one, and then we kind of went in for a little bit of coverage in the actual final, episode. What you see in the show is a little bit of editing with coverage. But Milo and I really worked our tails off. Right when we got the script, we read through it a bunch together, and we talked about it a lot, and sort of our points of views of where the characters were and what they were sort of going through. And then we rehearsed it a bunch, like did a walkthrough with the camera department and our director, Ken Olin, and sort of figured out like all of the steps that we were going to take, so then when we came back and shot it the next day, it was a couple hours and we knew exactly what we were doing. And it got really heated. Like, there were some F words thrown around. Like, we turned it up real hot and then we turned it down a little bit, and it was exhausting and horrible. Just a horrible place to sit and to be. And even I think it permeated to like the crew. I think everybody was generally like, guys, don't do this. Don't treat each other this way. Don't say these things to one another. Like, there's no going back from that. It was a really challenging part of the episode to shoot, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the show does a really good job of portraying the passage of time and the passage of decades. I want to ask, is it at all surreal to you, we're about the same age, seeing times that you were growing up and being portrayed as periods that you have to recreate?
It is. Like, it's definitely trippy working with like the 8-year-olds in sort of that 88 time period and looking around the house at like the little mementos and cereal boxes and going, oh my God, I remember that. And it's, I think that's the trick of the show, and what people love is that we really are kind of have our finger firmly pressed on the nostalgia button. It's nice to be able to go back and think about your childhood or think about who you were in those different time periods.
To that end, what have you learned about yourself from doing this show as an actress, as a person?
I have learned that I'm really hard on myself, which I've kind of always known and suspected, but I am. And not that I would necessarily change it, but I really demand a lot of myself, and I've learned that thoroughly by working on a project like this that does demand a lot of me anyway. I demand even more of myself than I think would necessarily be required. It's made me want to be a mom like more. I've always wanted to be a mom and have children, but it's sort of shown me like, oh, I think I could be ready for this point in my life. And maybe that just coincided with me being 33 and going like, oh, well, yep, just I guess biologically, like my body's telling me like, yep, it's time to do that. So I'm sure those two things are sort of influencing one another, but then also that I'm not anywhere near ready to be a parent. I remember the second episode, Ken Olin came up to me and he's like, you're asking permission of the children too much. Like, you're the parent, stop asking them permission. I was like, so that's how it works. Okay. So I learned that as well. You're the boss, you wear the pants, you don't need to ask your kids for permission to do things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, I appreciate
Nice
it.
to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.